Is it working? Hello, 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 hello. Testing, testing. Hello, 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 hello. Yeah. Hello, 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 hello. Let me try. Yeah.
Coming tonight for our series Mysteries of the Louvre, and it's good that you could come out on, I think, what's been the coldest week that I remember in Sydney. The other night it was 2 degrees out where I live, and I heard it was -2 out in Richmond and Windsor, so it's been super cold. Tonight I want to welcome Neale Schofield, who I've known for quite a number of years. In fact, my wife used to work for him when he was the CEO of Adventist Media, making all sorts of different media productions at that time. But when he left that job, he disappeared, went to Europe for quite a number of years, and I think you started with a master's, right, Neale? A master's. But you can tell us maybe a bit more about it. Well, mate, why don't you come up here and I can ask you a little bit more about... Initially, I think you went to England to do your master's, and then you did your PhD up in Scotland, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, do you want to tell us a little bit more about that?
So I started living in London and at the King's College London in the School of Divinity, and also with the National Gallery of London. So did that first, and then moved on to the University of St Andrews in Scotland. I did my PhD living in St Andrews and Germany.
Did you get to play any golf?
I did, actually. It's one of the benefits is it's very cheap to be a member of St Andrews if you live there.
Yeah. And so how many years was all of that, the part in England and then Scotland?
Well, it was spread over. So it was 1 year in London, and then I came back to Sydney, then went back to London and was executive chairman of Life Health Foods in London.
Okay.
And then went to New Zealand to run Hope Channel in New Zealand, living in Auckland.
Oh, that's right. There was the Hope Channel in between.
And then moved over to St Andrews in Germany after that, and we've been back for a couple of years.
All right. Well, without any further ado, I want to hand it over to Neale for the mysteries of the Louvre tonight, and we look forward to this presentation. And I know that all of you have some interest in art. I know some of you, I know through the art and painting class, some of you through the exhibitions that we've run, some of you through the church. All of you are very special, and we're really glad that you're here today. Now, today is the first of 3 sessions. If you don't have one of these flyers, we will hand those out on your way out. You can still invite a friend for tomorrow's sessions. So tomorrow, 11 o'clock, Mona Lisa. Are You More Valuable? And then 2 o'clock after lunch, we have a light lunch in between, is The Ship of Fools, How to Succeed in Life. And so some great seminars. All of this will actually be recorded and will be on YouTube for you to watch or share if you want to do that later on as well. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Daniel. It's certainly lovely to be here. It's been a few years since I've been to Alara, and it's a wonderful place. And yes, Daniel mentioned I've known him for some time, and certainly a pleasure to be here tonight to share a little tour, I guess you could say, of the Louvre. My interest in the world of art is that I grew up in a home where my stepfather was an artist and sculptor, and university senior lecturer in the world of art, and also in my days of business, in advertising, I would present to different clients, and I'm a strategic thinker, and so I'd share the strategies with, for instance, Ferrero, and then my creative partner would, as soon as he showed the pictures, people had come to life. And so I could see the value in art, and I've certainly made it an interest as a historian to see the way that the arts have influenced the Christian church through the century is a particular passion of mine. And so in this series, as we look at the Louvre, our focus will be on the way that the Christian art has influenced history, and we're going to concentrate on the Louvre Museum. It's been my pleasure to visit, I think, just about every major art museum in the world, and the Louvre is a special one. So come with me, and we'll head into the Louvre Museum. It's the largest and most visited museum in the world. It has 35,000 artefacts and another 420,000 in storage, and so they've got plenty there. If you were to spend 8 hours a day and just 1 minute on each of those paintings and artefacts, you'd be there for, I think it's 73 days to soak it all in. And the Louvre it has all of these the different types of art there. The Louvre here took 600 years in total to build to what it is today. So imagine if you built a house and then 600 years later they handed you the keys. Not quite like that, but you get the point. For a start, it's 400 times bigger than the average house. So some of you no doubt have been to the Louvre, probably on a number of occasions. It's a magnificent building steeped in political and religious history. And I encourage you to head over there if you haven't. The building began in 1190 as a political fortress, really, against attackers in Paris. And it became a palace for the kings of France. And over time, some of the greatest works of art have hung on these walls. So let's begin by looking at one of the oldest pieces in the Louvre. And this was a painting that was created for the Parliament there in Paris. And the idea was that to hang it up on the wall in Parliament, so when the politicians were making their laws, they kept Jesus Christ and religion in mind to make sure they made good laws and moral laws. And so that was the aim of it. And if we have a look at this, we can see that Jesus, the crucified Christ, is the centre of the work of art. We have the mother of Jesus here being consoled by Mary Magdalene. And this is John the Evangelist looking up to Jesus. We have John the Baptist here with pointing to the Lamb and the Bible. We have over here we have St. Louis IX, and he was known for really attacking anyone who he saw as blasphemous. He's also known for the Crusades against the Muslims, and what he would do, if you were guilty of blasphemy, he'd cut off your tongue and your lips, and to give you to make sure that you couldn't keep going with it. And then we have over this side we have Charlemagne, known for bringing together the Roman Empire. And the artist, the unknown artist, has also brought in here, I'll focus in on St. Denis. Now you can see him there. He was reportedly had his head chopped off as a martyr, and this is how tradition records it. And he was then said to walk 10 kilometres preaching while he's holding his head. Well, of course, that's tradition, and some would believe that. So they've got that there in that painting. But you'll notice up in this back corner is the Louvre, and by the River Seine in Paris. And there we have from the 1400s, we have the Louvre there. So that's one of the great paintings of the Louvre. And what I'm going to do tonight is share some of the paintings that I've found in my different trips to the Louvre have had a significant impact on me as a historian and also an interest in the Christian faith. King Francis transformed the Louvre into a royal palace, and one of the things I can remember when I think I was in my early 20s, and it was my first trip to Europe, and coming from Australia and a fairly rural area of Australia, to go in and see just the opulence of these buildings was like, wow! I sort of had never seen anything like it, and certainly the French knew how to decorate, and I found it just staggering. And it was this king who persuaded Leonardo da Vinci to leave Italy and come and join him in his royal palace there in Paris. The origin of Louvre or Louvre, by the way, I know there's some here who speak French. I don't. My doctoral studies is based on Latin and Old German, and even there it's reading rather than speaking. So French is not my area of expertise, but historians suggest that Louvre or Louvre originally came from meant castle or watchtower, or the word Louvre-Tuerie is sort of a place where wolves were kept. And so not quite sure, but no matter the etymology, one thing for sure is that the name or the brand Louvre or Louvre is extremely valuable. In fact, if any of you have been to the Louvre Museum in Dubai, they paid 650 million Australian dollars just to have the brand, so that they could call it the Louvre Museum there in Abu Dhabi. And so that's how much they were willing to pay for that. And in this particular Louvre Museum in Abu Dhabi, they have, I think they have about 600 works, including the most expensive painting ever sold, the Saviour of the World. But I remember going there and I said, well, okay, where is it? It's nowhere to be seen. And the reason is because the great, the Crown Prince, Mr. Live Golf and all the rest of it, from what I hear, he's got it on his own private yacht. So he's the one who forked out the money, and why would he want it in the museum when he can have it there just hanging beside himself? So that's the value of the brand. And certainly stories relating to the church history fascinate me, particularly in the early modern period throughout the 15th, the 16th and the 17th century. And the history of the Louvre includes quite a lot of attacks against Protestant Christians, in particular, including the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre on the 24th of August, 1572. And in this, on this day, Paris there, a whole lot of Huguenot Protestants came to Paris to attend a wedding. And when they came to this, to Paris here, they were attacked because the wedding was actually the daughter of Catherine Medici there, and she was going to have none of that. And so she ordered an attack. And as the church bells tolled, as some would say, she ordered an attack, and her son, King Charles IX, well, he was waiting there in the Louvre, in the window of the Louvre with his crossbow, ready to get these Protestant Christians. And the leader of the Protestants, they took him and they cut off his hands and his feet, and they dragged him through the city. Estimates are that throughout France, 70,000 of these Huguenots were killed, and the reports are blood was running through the streets, and in the River Seine there was so many dead bodies that they couldn't eat the fish there for months. And so this is the sort of history and the Christian and the religious history that is associated with the Louvre. Now, when this attack from the Louvre and from Paris took place, when the news came to Pope Gregory XIII, he was jubilant. So much so that he, by the way, in the Vatican you can see his symbol, which is the dragon there. And he declared a day of festivity and jubilation. And the fellow who actually came with the news, he gave him 1,000 crowns for his efforts. He sent the King of France a golden rose, and then he struck this medal here, this coin, in honour of the fact of that St. Bartholomew's Day massacre. Well, let's move on a couple of hundred years into the 1793, when the Louvre opened as a museum for the people. Napoleon had become emperor, and as he saw the Louvre, he had a real vision for the Louvre. And he said this: "The Louvre can never be a comfortable residence. I regard it as a kind of ceremonial palace in which we must store all our riches in the field of art and science, such as statues, bronze sculptures, paintings, books, archives and medals." He even put, if you go there today, you'll see plenty of N for Napoleon around the Louvre to ensure that his stamp was on it. And as you enter the museum today, the Louvre Museum, of course, there's just such wonderful artefacts, and so huge that we have here from around the world: Babylon, Assyria, Egypt, Rome, Greece, and here are just a few of them. The Greek goddess of love and beauty you can see, and of course the Nike and the winged victory of Samothrace, an island there of Greece, as you walk up those stairs. I'm sure many of you can remember that if you have been to the Louvre as you're going up those stairs there. But the Louvre is best known for its paintings. And when it first began, there were about 500. Now there's 5,500. And some of these paintings, they are so big. And this would, for the French, paintings such as Liberty leading the people with the flag and the independence and the Republic. It's just a wonderful painting for the French. And also we have this enormous painting here, the consecration of Napoleon and Josephine. When it was painted, Napoleon, here you can see Napoleon, and he's about to put a crown on Josephine. And when it was painted, and Napoleon had a look at the painting that's now in the Louvre, the Pope was originally just sitting there with his hands on his on his lap, and Napoleon said, "No, we're not having the Pope just sit there. He needs to do something." And so the artist made sure the Pope was blessing the coronation. And so that's another of the great paintings there in the Louvre. This one here we're going to speak about tomorrow afternoon, Raft of Medusa. Once again, extremely important to French history and a wonderful story. I say wonderful, a story that is of great significance to not only to the French, but I believe to us today. And we'll talk about that tomorrow. But once again, you can see the size of these paintings. And for the rest of this presentation tonight, I'd like to share with you some of the highlights for me. as I've gone to the Louvre on a number of occasions, and particularly as a Christian, as a historian and minister of religion, the areas that I have found quite fascinating, the paintings. So some of the things, the photographer Ansel Adams said, pictures are usually looked at and seldom looked into. I find the same with paintings. In fact, when I was at the National Gallery of London each day for many days, I'd noticed that the tourists would come in. It's the same as the Louvre, and they'd come in and they'd look at a painting, then they'd go to the next one. They're looked at, but they're seldom looked into, and they're very rarely researched to find the true meaning. Where you share the meaning, it's like, oh, okay, I get it now. So they can see the significance of it. And I wish that I had more time to be able to share some of these artefacts and paintings from the Louvre, but hopefully I'll give enough of a glimpse to encourage us, not just to the Louvre, by the way, but the Art Gallery here in New South Wales and so on, to wherever it happens to be, to look at the works of art that are so important to history and to the people who painted them. I know that some of you are artists, and you have such a wonderful gift. I believe it's a gift from God. And it's just it's a beautiful part of life to see art. The first thing that I'd like to share with you is the Code of Hammurabi. This is more not so much the arts, but certainly in terms of archaeology. The first book of secondly the Meshe Stele, and thirdly the painting of the wedding at Cana. Then the painting of young Martha, and I'll go through each of these tonight. The death of the Virgin, and finally, of course, the Mona Lisa, which we'll talk more about. We'll talk more about tomorrow. But the first book of the Bible, the book of Genesis, it tells the famous story of Noah's flood. Now, if ever there's a topic that I've found in my research, my main area of research is looking at the period from 1555 to 1618. But it's looking at the way art has been used in books and in churches to show Bible stories and Bible history. If there's one subject that artists loved in history, it's the story of Noah's flood. Even the old Bibles, you get a lot of the old Bibles that are illustrated, but they had to pick their illustrations. They couldn't illustrate every story. But Noah and the flood, that's a really important one. And so what we find here in Genesis 10, which tells the story of the flood, it goes and it talks about, in Genesis 10, the descendants of Noah. And one of them was a fellow called Nimrod, and it says, Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord, and the beginning of his kingdom was Babel. And so here we find the start of Babel, and Nimrod means rebellion. I want to share with you now, I'm a collector of rare books, by the way, and rare printed materials, and I have here, this is from 1473. This is an original printed page, so it's 530 years old. And I've got it up on the screen there as well. And this is, by the way, this book from which it came, Schedel's Chronicle of the World, this is the book that Martin Luther, if you've heard of Martin Luther, when he was a young man, he read that book because it was the standard book on the history of the world. And there was a picture in there of Jesus, and it frightened Martin Luther so much. He thought, oh no, if God is so angry like that, then I'm in big trouble. And so it's this book here, it's the Chronicle of the World. And so Martin Luther then started his journey into understanding what God is really like. Is he such an angry, nasty God? And so this book, the Chronicle of the World, and it shows the lineage, and this is Noah up here, and here's Nimrod down here. And so it tells the story, just as it has in Genesis chapter 10. Well, the building of the Tower of Babel, so Nimrod, remember, so we have Noah and the time of the flood, and then all the way down, And the kingdom of Babel was started there with Nimrod, a descendant of Noah. And during that time, they said, you know what? We never want another flood to wipe us out again. So they built this great tower, and the Tower of Babel, and some Jewish writings indicate that it was 2.5 kilometres high. And Josephus says that the bricks were burnt and coated in bitumen, so no water could ever get in to the Tower of Babel, so they would be safe against God if another flood happened to come. And this particular painting in the Louvre by Lucas van Valkenburg, by the way, the Louvre has 18 paintings of the Tower of Babel, paintings and illustrations. That's another favourite. Just as the flood is a favourite, so is the Tower of Babel. And we can see Nimrod down here. He's checking out the building progress in this painting here in the Louvre. And the Bible indicates that during this building of this temple to try and outdo God, God sent them a confusion in their language. And so somebody's trying to say, well, can you pass me a mud brick? But he just started babbling out some language that they've never heard of before. And the word Babel is linked to the verb balal, which means confusion. And over time, this Babel became Babylon or Babylon. And in the Louvre, there are many pagan religious artefacts that have been linked, say, to Babylon from the time of Babylon, such as the sixth king in Babylon, Hammurabi, and he is worshipper of a pagan god. The Ishtar vase, of course, in Babylon. They had if you go to Berlin, you'll see the great Ishtar gates. And Isis and Horus from Egypt, once again in the Louvre, the worship of pagan gods. And this is the code of Hammurabi. So we've gone through from Noah and then to Nimrod. He was the first king, and then the sixth king was Hammurabi. And so this is one of the most magnificent, I think it's, I'm just trying to think of just how, I know it's 4,000 years old, 4 tonne slab, this here. And what it had is it had the laws for Babylon on there. And so and here we have Hammurabi, and coming before the sun god Shamash. And the sun god is handing over the royal insignia to Hammurabi, the king of Babylon. And underneath there is the laws of the land. So let's take a look at some. Code 153. If a woman had brought about, so this is 4,000 years old, by the way. So if a woman had brought about the death of her husband because of another man, they shall impale that woman on stakes. So this, on this slab, this is the sort of thing they would have. If a barber, without the knowledge of his master, cut the sign of a slave on a slave not to be sold, the hands of this barber shall be cut off. So that was such an important law to them that they'd put it on there. If a builder build a house for someone and does not construct it properly, and the house which he built fall in and kill its owner, then that builder shall be put to death. So you want to make sure you build a house properly. Otherwise, you'll be the one who'll be going down the tubes. But outside the Louvre, those laws are inside the Louvre. Outside the Louvre, they have sculptures of Moses here with the Ten Commandments. And I think there are a couple of sculptures of Moses with the Ten Commandments. And so if you go through the Bible, the Ten Commandments are laws of God. And Jesus said, if you love me, keep my commandments. And the book of Romans says, so then the law is holy, and the commandment is holy, righteous, and good. So I've found that the Code of Hammurabi has enormous impact on the history and showing how the laws worked all those years ago and compared them to Christian laws today. Then we have the Mesha Stele. This also is an archaeological item. And what I've found also in my studies as a historian is that often the Bible is doubted because historians or archaeologists have not, the Bible will say something and then they'll say, oh, well, they just made that up. There's no record in history. But then I've found that archaeologists and historians come along and they find what the Bible had said all along. And that's an example of that is this stele here. This Phoenician script, that 34 lines of Phoenician script. It was found in Jordan in 1868. And what it does is it confirms the stories from the book of Kings, how the pagan Moabites had attacked the Israelites when King Ahab died, and how they worshipped Chemosh. Here it says, I am Mesha, king of Moab, the Dibonite. I made this high place for Chemosh, because it made me triumph over all my opponents. Omri was king of Israel, and he oppressed Moab for many years. From there I took the sacred vessels of Yahweh, and I dragged them before Chemosh. So here they are. They're actually in this stele. They're repeating a story that is told in the Bible, in the book of Kings. And so historians will say, oh, look, no, that never happened. But then it's uncovered, and the Bible is shown. It reflects the Bible in 2 Kings chapter 3. It's one of the earliest known mentions of the Hebrew God Yahweh, Jehovah, and also mentioned is due to the house of David. So what I've found is going to places like the Louvre and seeing these sort of things, it confirms the trustworthiness of the Bible. And for a researcher like me, that's really important, to be able to see that, yes, I can trust the Bible and believe it to be true. Then this painting here in the Louvre. So I've looked at the Code of Hammurabi, some archaeological finds. We'll now look at some paintings. This one here is one big painting. You can see somebody standing here. It's 10 metres long, this painting, and nearly 7 metres high. So I don't know, it's how far that would go. About like what we've got here. So it is one big painting. It took the artist 18 months to paint, and Napoleon, when he was trying to get it over the Alps, he had to cut it in half and haul it with mules to get it to the Louvre, but he got it there, and but it is one giant painting. And of course it tells the biblical story of Jesus turning water into wine. And the artist, Veronese, he's painted about, I think there's 130 people here in this painting, and you see the bright colours. What I love about a number of these artists is that they'd take biblical stories and then they'd bring it into their time. And so they would, for instance, this is, the location is Venice, and they've taken people from their time and put Jesus there so that when people come in from the area from where it's painted, they can say, oh, okay, I can see how this is relevant for me. And the artist has done this in this case. And what the artist also has is lots of playing, and we have the instruments at this wedding, and this is the artist. What you find is that artists love to paint themselves in their own paintings. And Veronese painted himself here in the white silk, playing a stringed instrument. We have Jesus with disciples and mother, and then we have up the top people with meat cleavers, and then we have a dwarf with a parrot, and this is something I'll just share with you a little bit of history. And even a dog there on the table. They love to include this sort of thing. So what happened in history is when the Protestant Reformation took place, when people like Martin Luther said, look, the church has just gone way off the tracks, then let's reform it. Let's make changes in its theology and its practice and even in works of art. Then, after the death of Luther, the Catholic Church said, okay, we'll have they formed the Council of Trent, and in that they said, let's have a look how we should reform the church. So let's see how we should reform the Catholic Church. And one of their big areas of reform was in the area of painting. And what they said is, look, it's time for artists to stop putting dogs in it and all of that sort of thing. Let's just make it, simple and clear, and stop all of this. So when the artist Veronese here, when he painted the Last Supper, well, the church hauled him into the Inquisition. He was accused of being a heretic. He said, look, you've painted this badly. This is really wrong. And they accused him of painting a man with a nosebleed, a disciple using a toothpick, what they called buffoons or clowns, dwarfs, and maybe worst of all, Germans drinking beer. And so they brought him in and said, okay, you're up before the Inquisition, you're a heretic, and let's investigate your paintings. Well, what he did is he thought about it and he said, okay, I'll change the name of the painting from the Last Supper to the Feast of the House of Levi, because Jesus said that there were tax collectors and sinners there. And then the Catholic Church said, oh, okay, then fair enough, and they let him off. So that's just a little bit of history from the paintings there, in the great paintings that we have in the Louvre. This particular painting, for me, is certainly one of, if not my favourite in the Louvre, it's certainly one of them, the Young Martyr. And, in museums, in galleries, they often shift paintings around. I don't know if you've noticed that, but if you've been there before, you're looking for it, it's not there, and they move them around. But the last time I was there, I remember this particular painting was quite close to the Mona Lisa, and I find that this particular painting, the Young Martyr, quite a captivating painting. And what we find is that the artist, who loved to paint historical and religious paintings, he's painted a martyr and from the time of Diocletian, and we see in this painting the face. She's pale. She is Paul de la Roche was the artist. She's has her hands tied, and she's in the Tiber River here in Rome, and there are a couple of onlookers in the back, and she is floating. Now, what is unknown, this is what I'm saying, that when you go to a gallery, whether it be Louvre or wherever it happens to be, do some research to find out. Because what the artist did is that he painted the face of the young martyr is actually the face of his wife, the love of his life, who died at a very young age, in her early 30s. And so he painted, when he thought of the most beautiful woman in the world to paint, he painted the face of his wife there, who died. And the heartache it brought to him. He wants, as people come to look at these works of art, he wants the same similar sort of emotions to come as you look at this young girl, the artist's wife, Louise. But let's come back then to the time of this, where Diocletian certainly attacked Christians during the 303 AD to 313 AD, these 10 years, became known as the Great Persecution. And at each time, all Christian books were burned. Anyone suspected of following Jesus was tortured to death, either being stretched out on the rack or dying through crucifixion. And another thing, I know it's a little macabre, but as you go through Europe, I tell you what, if you look at some of those persecution museums, you see the full effect of what some of these people went through for their faith. And I'll share with you one story. It's in the Fox's Book of Martyrs, which is a famous book on telling the story of the martyrs. And it just gives us an idea perhaps of what may have happened to someone like the young martyr that is in the Louvre there today. In this book of martyrs, we can see the painting here, the story of a young couple, Timothy and Maura, and they were married for just 3 weeks when Timothy was arrested. His crime was to have a copy of the scriptures, and he was told that he must hand them over, and he said, "I won't." And he said, "Had I children, I would sooner deliver them up to be sacrificed than part with the word of God." That's how much dedication he had for the word of God. And so the torturer said, "Okay, we'll burn your eyes out, and that way you'll never be able to read it again." And then they stretched him out, and as he was being crucified, actually he was crucified upside down. But Maura said, "Recant!" And he said, "I won't." Well, she said, "Okay, I'm coming with you." And they were both killed for their faith. And this is the sort of, when I read and I see paintings like the young martyr, and I just imagine, I think of that, I think of just how good we have it here in Australia, compared with people through history who have died for their faith as Christians. The next painting I want to share with you from the Louvre is from Caravaggio. Now, one of the difficulties that I have in presenting is that it seems like everyone is my favourite artist or my favourite painting, but Caravaggio is certainly my favourite artist. And he was just, if anyone was unique, it was this artist. And in this painting of the Death of the Virgin, it's virtually a life-size painting. And what Caravaggio did, if you have a look at many of the artworks on the death of Mary, the mother of Jesus, they often show it as such a glorious event. And you see Mary and she's going up to heaven and all the rest of it. Well, Caravaggio said, "Oh, hang on. And he painted her extremely pale. You may not be able to see, but she's barefoot, hand-flopped. The clothes are fairly tatty, bald-headed disciples. You see Mary Magdalene just slumped in just mourning. And the church of the day said, "No, we're not going to have that for a painting of Mary, the death of the Virgin. No way in the world." And they said, "That is blasphemy. We're not going to have it like that." But what happened is that because Caravaggio, who, by the way, he was a real rascal. I remember reading on one occasion that he was in a restaurant and the waiter had burnt the artichokes, so he threw the artichokes on the waiter, and he actually murdered someone. He was a real character, if ever there was one, and not your typical religious person. And so, but what happened is this: when Caravaggio painted, when people came into a church, instead of coming and looking at a painting that looked so different, I guess you could say, they would come and say, "Wow, okay, that person's just like me. That maybe I've got hope. I can't reach the level of all these other great saints, but maybe I've got some hope in this Christian life, and maybe I can be involved in that." And Caravaggio had such an impact on people. He understood shame. He understood depression. He understood the challenges of having a low self-worth. And he painted biblical history from his heart. And when he painted his paintings, it really resonated, I believe, even today with people, as people see that the Christian faith is for everyone, not just those who think that they're holier than other people. So let's come in conclusion to the works of Leonardo da Vinci, who finished as court artist to King Francis I. And in the Louvre there's, hang on, that's Caravaggio. Here's Leonardo da Vinci. In the Louvre there are 8 paintings from da Vinci, and this St. John the Baptist, that's probably one of the most, or certainly the most unique paintings of John the Baptist. If anything, he's sort of seen as a little bit, unusual there. Not the typical John the Baptist, but he's pointing there, and Da Vinci's, this is in the Louvre, and then the Virgin of the Rocks, where I was in London, in the National Gallery there, they have another Virgin of the Rocks by Da Vinci. And so that's just an example, of course, of the work that Da Vinci has in the Louvre. But the Mona Lisa, of course, is the most famous painting in the world. Who is she? Well, there's debate, but I think the most popular view is that she, as the model, is the wife of the man who actually commissioned the painting. And so that is the general view. And certainly the thought is that there are a number of versions before coming to this. She had a bigger smile and a whole lot of different thoughts on this painting. We'll talk more about it tomorrow. But one thing for sure, she's a survivor. She hung on the walls of Napoleon. She was stolen for 2 years, which we'll go into in depth tomorrow. She survived the Nazis during World War II. She had acid thrown on her. A young Bolivian threw a rock at her. She had a distraught Russian woman throw one of the Louvre souvenir mugs at her. She had, just last year, a protester in a wheelchair came along and hurled cake at her. And he was arrested. And so she's a survivor. But once again, if you go to the Louvre and you see the Mona Lisa, remember I was saying how people just come and have a little look? That's what happens. Because you're there and you're all jammed in and everyone's squeezing, because this is what they've come to the Louvre to see. And so everyone's jammed in and they've got their cameras up taking photos. So it's hardly a pleasant experience. And people are just there for a few seconds and they've said, okay, I've seen the Mona Lisa, now let's move on. But there is certainly something special about the Mona Lisa. And no doubt her smile is a key to her fame. Our portraits have historically been very sterile. Even if you look at some photos from 100 years ago of different people who are just sort of standing there like this, and very static, very serious. But here we have a woman who is sitting, open, smiling. It's like she's inviting a conversation with the viewer. And this is something that has attracted so many people. And we'll explore more on this in our future meetings. Speaking of which, tomorrow morning we're going to look at the concept of Mona Lisa. Are you more valuable? Now tonight's been more of a tour, a factual side of presentation. Tomorrow at 11 o'clock, we're going to apply this very much spiritually to look at what our value is. I think that it'd be a very encouraging message for you as we look at our self-worth and our value, and sort of taking from paintings, but then applying it from biblical concepts to our own life. So tomorrow at 11 o'clock is one that I really encourage you to come to. And then tomorrow we have lunch here, is that right, Daniel? And then at 2 o'clock we're looking at the Ship of Fools and how to succeed in life. So tomorrow afternoon will be quite a nautical series of paintings. And we're going to look at Raft of Medusa in the Louvre. This painting here, Ship of Fools, is in the Louvre. And we're going to investigate what really is our purpose in life, what does it mean to be successful in life, looking at some of these paintings. And I'm going to show you a series of paintings tomorrow that half of New York City came out to look at. It was so significant to people trying to succeed in life as they saw the secrets to success. So that's tomorrow afternoon. So thank you, and look forward to seeing you tomorrow. And please come up and see, do you have any questions? We have some time. If you have any questions, please. I don't profess to know it all by any means, or any comments or anything you've seen that you'd like to share that you've that would be interesting for us here. Yes, well, you're jammed in so much that you don't move too much. So I'm not sure. Yes, it's probably, this by this, yeah, it's quite small, yeah. Do you Okay. Let's go back. Was it Charlemagne? It may be his. Yeah. He's recognised as uniting the Holy Roman Empire. So it would. Let's go back here. There we go. So So this would be the orb or the globe. So it would be saying that that he is responsible for bringing the world together. Yeah, true, indeed. Yes, it's a very popular image in works of art. Yeah.
It seems that in the past there was a lot of paintings on biblical stories and
Yes.
so forth. Is there much of that happening in the modern world today? Because I don't see so much of that side of things.
Yeah. If we look into history, one of the big reasons why paintings were so important is because people couldn't read. And so, or very few people could read. And so they come to experience church, and so this helped people to understand what the person is talking about by saying, look, you have a look at this, and so on and so forth. Now, of course, it got to the point where people actually ended up worshipping the images and the paintings instead of trying to see what they were trying to say. In terms of contemporary art, it definitely doesn't have the emphasis that it did have through history. And sadly, to be candid, I'm actually a Protestant, but I blame Protestantism to some extent because, if anything, it went too far to say, it's like even here, where are our artworks, to be candid, and what an impact it can have. And so it ended up that one of the reformers, a man by the name of Karlstadt, who did some good things there where my wife and I lived in Wittenberg in Germany, he also said, let's get rid of all art. And Luther said, no, that's not right. We need art in church. We need art in our Bibles because they can help people understand. Luther said, for the sake of children and simple folk, it helps people to understand what the Bible is saying, and I think we can go too far, and I think the Christian church has gone too far, Daniel, and sadly we don't have the emphasis. But what a wonderful thing it will be if there's a great emphasis here at Wallara.
James said he should do that because inside he had all these religious fascinations he was trying to explore, and he brings them out in various settings and by a series of all popes, his very famous series of the popes, and then of course the crucifixion and that sort of stuff. So he's worth one to look at if you want to see the modern appreciation of Christianity. And he wasn't a Christian at all, anyway. Interesting.
If some of you have, Daniel was saying some of you have done the Secrets of Prophecy Bible study series, and if you look in those booklets, there's quite a few original works of art in there, and I'll tell you the story of how it came about, because I wrote those booklets, and a man came in to see me who is an artist, and he said, look, Neale, I've given my life to God, and he said, I've spent my life painting motorbike tanks with skulls and all the rest of it. He said, I want to finish with that. I want to paint for God. Is there anything you can do for me? And I said, I think there is. And so I asked him to paint, and most of those paintings in the Secrets of Prophecy booklets, he hand-painted. And so they've gone right around the world today. So it's amazing what just one person who is an artist, just the impact you can have globally on sharing the message of God is far greater than what I could do presenting like this, because it just crosses all boundaries and cultures and can have such an impact. So I encourage you to use that gift. Yes?
Why do artists tend to paint Jesus so anglo-looking?
Yeah. Well, that's a good question, isn't it? And I think as time moves on, there is a greater variety of Christ. But yes, he looks. Most images of Christ are European, and rather than the Middle Eastern, which would have been the reality of.
Although in the American art scene, the Black Christ
Yeah.
has been around since the 60s onwards.
Yeah.
So they're generally black people,
Yeah.
and the black artists always paint everyone in the nativity scene as black,
Yes.
and so on. So that has emerged from America,
Yeah.
that concept.
Yeah. Yeah. And there is a danger of having too much focus on, Christ. It's. I'd say emphasise the character of Christ more than the visual image of Christ. Is what I would say.
I guess the Renaissance painters were all from Europe, so
Yes.
they painted themselves into the picture, they
Yes.
painted their clothes
Yes.
into the picture, and
Yeah.
so they painted Christ as themselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
They often use models, obviously.
Yes, and that's one thing that Caravaggio did. Remember, I was speaking about Caravaggio. His models were prostitutes and the real strugglers in society, because he wanted, when people saw these religious images, he wanted them to identify with his works so that they would see, oh, okay, so this is who Jesus was with. And right, okay, I can see that I've got hope. Yep. Okay, look forward to seeing you tomorrow, 11 o'clock.
Yeah. Before
Thank
we finish up, thank you so much, Neale. I was actually going to come up and ask if there's any questions, but you
Okay.
beat me to that. So it's good that to have questions. And, I really love the Caravaggios as well. And the contrast is really strong, isn't it? Often dark, but also really strong contrast between the light and the dark. While I'm here, I just wanted to... we do have some of these little flyers up the back, just telling people in our community that we do run art classes here in the church. Maybe some of you know somebody who would like to paint. And so we do that every second month at the moment on the first Sunday of every second month. Okay, so that's one thing that we do here. We do have some more of these flyers advertising this particular weekend. So if you want to still share one of those, because some of you, I'm sure, probably just received the electronic image through email or SMS or something. But if you want one of these flyers, we have a few of those left up the back. And the other thing, like you even mentioned Caravaggio or other artists, etc., they go through various strong emotional periods of time, depression or whatever, even, jubilation or whatever. One of the things that our society struggles with today, I think, is depression and anxiety and emotional issues. And one of the things that we'll be running here in a few weeks' time on a Wednesday night is a 7-week program called Empowered and Purposeful Living. And it'll address issues like gratitude, values, emotional intelligence, resilience, kindness and generosity, purpose and meaning, and hope and optimism. All of these things, I think that's one of the reasons why artists also like to paint, because it helps them with their own emotions, doesn't it? I know that coming here on those Sundays and just painting helps me to kind of chill out, and it's therapeutic, so to speak. And lastly, we have had some artists here in this church in the past. Is that right, Andrew? I never knew them because they passed on before I even came here, but some of their artworks is hanging at the front there, or even right up the back of the church. Right when you walk in, there is the burning bush with Moses. And interestingly, I think the artist was Dutch, and that's why there are clogs. Is that right?
Oh, really?
Was he? Well, he's got clogs on his feet.
He obviously thought Moses was Dutch.
Moses was Dutch. Yeah, I've often thought, can we alter this painting to give Moses sandals at least, Anyway, it's interesting how artists think about biblical stories. Oh, and lastly, one of the members here at the church just recently gave me a book which has 241 plates by Gustave Doré. You heard of that one? The Doré Bible illustrations. Yeah. And so I was thinking, it's got, on the front cover there, it's got Moses smashing the commandments. And I was thinking, one of the things that maybe I could look at or encourage also is those artists that do come, maybe they do want to paint something biblical, rather than, a still life or a landscape or something like that. Yeah. So
and just on that, Daniel, early books that were published by the Seventh-day Adventist Church around the turn of the 20th century, so the early 1900s, they were quality books that had Gustave Doré and other artists in, hundreds of beautiful illustrations in them, and hardcover, really good quality. And I find it challenging today that, often the churches, not just our church, but they print these real cheap ones with yellow paper and no illustrations and that type of thing. I think it's time to get back to quality, such as the paintings that were there. So.
Yeah. Well, hopefully, Neale, you've encouraged us here at Wallara today to go down the track of encouraging art and relating that art to the biblical stories. Thanks so much.
Good. Thank you.
Why don't we close with a prayer tonight before we go? Neale, would you like to pray?
Yes, happy to. Father in heaven, thank you for the gift of the arts and our ability to be able to express your love to us and our love to you, and Lord, the beauty of creation and the beauty of the gospel. Help us, Father, to understand the mystery, not just of the Louvre, but the mystery of the gospel, and to apply this to our life. Thank you for this wonderful church here in Wallara, and for the beautiful people that are here. And we look forward to tomorrow and the meetings that we have tomorrow too. Help us to have a good night's rest, we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.